Flat and fat. Those were the two words that Sarah thought of when she looked in the mirror, which she did a lot. Other girls could describe their shapes as being like an hourglass or a pear. Sarah was shaped like a potato. Looking at her bulbous nose, her prominent ears, and how all her parts seemed stuck onto her body at random, she was reminded of the Mrs. Mix-and-Match doll she had as a kid. The one with different eyes, ears, noses, mouths, and other body parts you could stick on her to make her look as hilarious as you wanted. And so that was the nickname she came up with for herself, Mrs. Mix-and-Match. But at least Mrs. Mix-and-Match had a husband. Unlike the girls at school, Sarah didn't have a boyfriend, or any prospect of one. She guessed that she, like Mrs. Mix-and-Match in her single days, would just have to wait around until some equally unfortunate-looking guy came along. But in the meantime, she had to get ready for school. As Sarah was applying her makeup, she looked at the photos she hung up on the walls. Her room was decorated with photos of models and pop stars she had cut out of magazines. Sometimes, when she was getting ready in the morning, she felt as if these goddesses of beauty were looking at her with disappointment. Still, she liked having the goddesses there. If she couldn't see beauty when she looked in the mirror, at least she could see it when she looked at the walls. After Sarah was done, she went down to the kitchen and greeted her mom. Her mom never wore makeup or did anything special with her hair, and she had a tendency to put on weight around her hips. Still, Sarah had to admit that her mom had a natural prettiness she herself lacked. Maybe it skips a generation, Sarah thought. Sarah's mom asked her if she wanted a bagel. Sarah declines and just takes the usual, yogurt and a bottle of water. Her mom wanted her to eat some carbs so she wouldn't faint, but Sarah ignores her and goes to catch the bus. Unlike most mornings, Sarah actually made it to the school bus in time, so she didn't have to walk. She sat by herself and watched YouTube makeup tutorials on her phone. Maybe on her next birthday, Mom would let her wear more than mascara and BB cream and tinted lip balm. She could get what she needed to do some real contouring, to make her cheekbones look more pronounced and her nose less bulbous. Getting her brows done professionally would also really help. Right now, she and her tweezers were fighting a daily battle against a unibrow. While Sarah was getting her books from her locker, she saw them. They strutted down the hall like supermodels doing a runway show, and everybody stopped what they were doing to watch them. Lydia, Jillian, Tabitha, and Emma. They were cheerleaders. They were royalty. They were stars. They were who every girl in school wanted to be, and who every boy in school wanted to be with. They were the Beautifuls. Just then, Abby stood next to her. She sees the Beautifuls and mocks them by calling them penguins because of how they walk and dress. Abby is Sarah's childhood best friend, and unlike Sarah, she didn't care about her appearance or trying to look beautiful. She was a smart person that liked to make theories. Abby wanted to be a scientist, and all those theories would probably come in handy one day when she was working on her PhD. Abby tells Sarah her theory on why she obsesses with the Beautifuls. Abby mentions how they both liked playing with their Barbie toys, but when they grew up, they were too old for them. So those empty-headed fashionistas became Sarah's Barbie substitute, and that's why she wants to play with them. Play? Sometimes it was like Abby was still a little kid. Sarah says she doesn't want to play with them, but she knew this wasn't completely true. At lunch, Sarah sat across from Abby. The other kids at the table were the nerds who hurried through their lunch so they could play card games until the bell rang. Sarah knew the Beautifuls called it the loser's table. Sarah asks Abby what she would do with $1 million. Before Abby would answer, Sarah tells her to answer something except for giving it to the Humane Society or the homeless. The money's just to spend on herself. Abby tells Sarah that she would take her family to Paris. She then asks Sarah what she would do with the money. Sarah tells her how she would change her appearance with surgeries to make her prettier. Abby gets upset with Sarah and tells her that she doesn't need any of that. Sarah shot a glance over to the beautiful table. Abby looked over to the table where Sarah was looking. She tells Sarah that even though the group was beautiful, they all looked alike. Sarah looked like a person, and she should look like an individual. She tells her that she is a nice individual that worried too much about her appearance. Abby continued and tells Sarah that she changed a lot the past couple of years. They used to talk about books and movies and music. Now all she wanted to talk about was how she doesn't like the way she looks, and about all the clothes and hairstyle and makeup she wished she could afford. Sarah felt anger rising like bile in her throat. How dare Abby judge her? Friends were supposed to be the people who didn't judge you. Sarah stood up and shouted at Abby, telling her that she is right. She did change. She grew up, while Abby didn't. Sarah was so angry that she marched off and left her tray on the table for somebody else to clean up. By the time school was over, Sarah had a plan. No more hanging out at the loser's table, and no more asking for her mom for permission to be beautiful. She was going to be as popular and as pretty as she possibly could be. She goes to the beauty supply store and was able to buy a box marked Pure Platinum Hair Dye to make her hair blonde, and some pre-oxide to bleach her hair. When Sarah got home, she immediately started to dye her hair. Moments later, she toweled off her hair and stepped over to the mirror to see the new her. She screamed. She screamed so loud that the neighbor's dog started barking. Her hair was not platinum blonde, but sewage green. She ran to her room, flung herself onto her bed, and cried. Her mom arrived at home. Then she came into Sarah's room and saw Sarah's new hairdo. She would have punished Sarah, but she guessed the green hair would have been enough punishment. She took Sarah to the hair salon, and Sarah's hair was back to being brown again, although a few inches shorter since the stylist had to cut off the dead ends. Sarah returned to school, not in a blaze of platinum blonde glory, but as her usually mosey brown self. Still, when lunchtime rolled around, she resolved that, even without blonde hair, she wasn't going to sit at the loser table. She served herself from the salad bar, then walked right past where Abby was sitting. She didn't need Abby to criticize her today. A knot formed in her stomach as she approached the beautiful's table. She was far enough to not intrude, but close enough that they could include her if they wanted. But she isn't able to follow their conversation, and they didn't even seem to notice her. Desperate to get out of the cafeteria, desperate to get out of the whole school, she gets up and heads to the trash. Lost in her suffering, she bumped right into a tall boy, dumping the remains of her salad on his crisp white shirt. She looked up into the ocean blue eyes of Mason Blair, the most perfect guy in school, the guy she always hoped might notice her. Sarah apologizes and dumps the rest of the food into the trash and runs out of the cafeteria. What a nightmare. She had wanted Mason to notice her, but not this way. Not as the ugly, clumsy girl with fried, frizzy brown hair who gave a new meaning to the words tossed salad. Why did everything have to go wrong for her? When the school day finally dragged to an end, Sarah decided to walk home instead of taking the bus. As she was walking, she passed by a wrecking yard. The car nearest the fence definitely fit into the heap of junk category. It was one of those big old sedans that only very elderly people still drove, the kind of car Sarah's mom called a land yacht. Then she saw the arm. A thin, delicate arm was sticking out of the trunk of the car, its little white hand with fingers outstretched as if waving hello, or waving for help, like someone who was drowning. Sarah was burned with curiosity. What was the hand attached to? The gate was unlocked. Nobody seemed to be watching. After looking around to make sure nobody was nearby, she stepped inside the wrecking yard. She held the metal arm and pulled it, but she couldn't pull it out of the closed trunk. She got a flat piece of metal and pried open the trunk. She inspected the owner of the hand she had seen sticking out of the trunk. Was it a discarded doll? Outgrown by some little girl and tossed it in the trash to end up in the dump? The thought made Sarah sad. Sarah pulled the doll from the trunk and stood it up on its feet. Though, once she looked at it, she wasn't sure doll was the right word to describe it. It was a few inches taller than Sarah herself, and it was jointed so that its limbs and waist looked movable. Was it some kind of marionette? A robot? Whatever it was beautiful. It had wide, green, long-lashed eyes, pink cupid bow lips, and pink circles on its cheeks. Its face was painted like a clown's, but a pretty clown. Its red hair was pulled up into twin pigtails on top of its head, and its body was sleek and silver, with a long neck, a tiny waist, and a rounded bust and hips. Its legs and arms were long, slender, and elegant. It looked like a robotic version of the gorgeous supermodels whose pictures hung on the walls of Sarah's room. Where had it come from? And why would someone want to get rid of such a beautiful, perfect object? Well, if whoever put this thing in the dump didn't want it, then Sarah did. She picked up the girl-shaped robot and found it surprisingly light. She carried it sideways, her arm around its delicate waist. In a room, Sarah set the girl robot down on the floor. It was a little tarnished and dusty, as if it had been in the trash heap for a while. Sarah went to the kitchen and got a rag and a bottle of cleaner that was supposed to be safe for metal surfaces. She sprayed and wiped the front of the robot, inch by inch, from head to toe. The shininess made it even more beautiful. As Sarah got behind the robot to clean the other side, she noticed an on and off switch at the small of its back. After she finished wiping it down, she turned the switch position to on. A rattling sound made Sarah turn it back around. The robot was shaking all over, like it was either going to rev up or break down entirely. Then it went still. The robot's waist pivoted, making its upper body move. It slowly raised its arms and then put them down. Its head turned to face Sarah, seeming to look at her with its big green eyes.
"Hello, friend,"
it said in a slightly metallic-sounding version of a young girl's voice.
"My name is Eleanor."
"Hi," Sarah whispered. "I'm Sarah."
"Nice to meet you, Sarah,"
the voice robot said. Whoa, how had it said her name back to her? It must have some pretty sophisticated built-in computer or something, Sarah thought. It was the kind of thing her brother might know about. He was in college, majoring in computer science. The robot took a few surprisingly smooth steps towards Sarah.
"Thank you for rescuing me and cleaning me up, Sarah,"
Eleanor, the robot, said.
"I feel good as new."
She gave a pretty, feminine twirl, her shirt skirt billowing. Sarah's mouth was hanging open. Was this thing capable of actual conversation? Of actual thought? You're welcome, she said.
"Now,"
Eleanor said, placing her cold, hard little hand on Sarah's cheek.
"you tell me what I can do for you, Sarah."
Sarah stared at the robot's blankly pretty face. What do you mean?
"You did something nice for me. Now I must do something nice for you."
Eleanor cocked her head like an adorable puppy.
"What do you want, Sarah? I want to make your wishes come true."
Nothing, really, Sarah said. It wasn't the truth, but really, how could this robot make her wishes come true?
"Everybody wants something,"
Eleanor said, brushing Sarah's hair away from her face.
"What do you want, Sarah?"
Sarah took a deep breath. She looked at the images of models and actresses and pop stars on her walls. She might as well say it. Eleanor was a robot. She wouldn't judge her. "I want," she whispered, feeling embarrassed. "I want to be beautiful." Eleanor clapped her hands.
To be beautiful! What a wonderful wish! But it is a large wish, Sarah, and I am petite. Give me 24 hours, and I will have a plan to start making this wish come true.
Okay, sure, Sarah said, but she didn't believe for 1 minute that this robot had the ability to transform her looks. She couldn't even quite believe that she was having a real conversation with it. When Sarah woke up the next morning, Eleanor was standing in the corner as still and lifeless as the other decorative objects in Sarah's room. No more alive than the stuffed Freddy Fazbear she had on her bed since she was 6. Maybe the conversation with Eleanor had just been a particularly vivid dream. That afternoon, when Sarah got home from school, Eleanor gives Sarah a chunky silver chain with a large, cartoonish silver heart pendant dangling from it. It was unusual. Pretty. You made this for me? Sarah said.
I did,
Eleanor said.
I want you to make me a promise. I want you to put this necklace on and never, ever take it off. Do you promise you'll keep it on? Always?
I promise, Sarah said. Thank you for making it for me. It's beautiful.
And you will be beautiful too,
Eleanor said.
Since your wish is so big, Sarah, I can only grant it a little at a time. But if you wear this necklace and keep it on each morning when you wake up, you'll be a little more beautiful than the day before.
Eleanor held out the necklace, and Sarah took it. Okay, thanks, Sarah said, not believing Eleanor for a minute. But she put on the necklace anyways, because it was pretty.
It looks good on you,
Eleanor said.
Now for the necklace to work, you have to let me sing you to sleep.
Like now? Sarah asked. Eleanor nodded. It's early, though. Mom isn't even home from work yet.
For the necklace to work, you have to let me sing you to sleep,
Eleanor repeated. Well, I guess I could take a little nap, Sarah said, not entirely sure that she wasn't already asleep and dreaming.
Get into bed,
Eleanor said, moving in her smooth stroll to the side of Sarah's bed. Even though she was a robot, everything about Eleanor was so feminine and lovely. Sarah pulled back the covers and got into bed. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed and stroked Sarah's hair with her cold little hand. She sang.
Go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep, my sweet Sarah. When you wake, all your dreams will come true.
Before Eleanor sang the last note, Sarah was asleep. Sarah was usually groggy and grumpy in the morning, but this morning she woke up feeling great. She reached up and felt the silver heart pendant hanging just below her throat. If the necklace was real, the talk she had with Eleanor must be real too. As she moved her hand away from her necklace, she noticed something else. Both her arms were slimmer, more toned somehow, and their skin, which was usually shallow, was healthy and glowing. Even her fingers looked a lot prettier. Sarah ran to the mirror to give herself a full inspection. Same mix and match face, nose, and body, but now with a perfect pair of arms and hands. She thought of Eleanor's words from last night.
Each morning, when you wake up, you'll be a little more beautiful than the day before.
Sarah was definitely a little more beautiful. Was this the way it was going to work? That every morning a different part of her would be transformed? She darted to the corner where Eleanor was standing and thanked her. Eleanor stood still and didn't move. At school, while Sarah was in the restroom, Jillian, one of the beautifuls, came in. She glanced down at Sarah's hands and complimented her polish. Sarah was so shocked she could barely manage to say, "Thanks." Jillian flounced out of the restroom, no doubt to join her popular friends. But she had seen Sarah, she had noticed Sarah, and she had liked at least one thing about her. Sarah smiled to herself for the rest of the day. Eleanor was mostly nocturnal. When the last of the winter daylight started to fade, she pivoted her waist, moved her arms up and down, and sprang to life. Sarah thanks Eleanor again for making her arms and hands beautiful, but she asked her why is she doing this. Eleanor tells her that she saved her from the wrecking yard, and now she wants to make her wishes come true. Eleanor then warns Sarah not to take the necklace off, and tells her that it's time to let her sing her to sleep. Sarah didn't want to sleep early again, as to not arouse suspicion from her mother, and because she still has homework to do. She tells her that she'll let her sing her to sleep in a few hours. Eleanor agrees, but tells her that she should sleep as early as possible. Sarah would want her beauty sleep. After eating dinner, finishing homework, and getting ready for bed, Sarah tells Eleanor she's ready. Sarah climbed under the covers, and Eleanor came to the bed with her rolling gait. She sat on the edge of the bed and reached out to touch Sarah's heart-shaped pendant.
Remember to keep it on, always, and never, ever take it off,
Eleanor said. I'll remember, Sarah said. Eleanor stroked Sarah's hair with her cold little hand and sang her lullaby.
Go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep, my sweet Sarah. When you wake, all your dreams will come true.
Once again, Sarah fell asleep before she knew what hit her. She woke up feeling refreshed, and when she stood up, she seemed to stand a little straighter, a little prouder, a little taller. She looked at her legs, and they were magnificent. Sarah went to eat breakfast, and her mother noticed how she looked a lot prettier today. Surprisingly, Sarah felt a ravenous hunger and ate some eggs to the surprise of her mother. At school, Sarah saw Abby in the hall and felt a pang of missing her. The two of them had so much history together, going back to the days of finger paint and Play-Doh. But Abby was stubborn. If Sarah waited for Abby to apologize to her, it might never happen. She walked up to Abby at her locker. Hey, Sarah said. Hey. Abby dug around in her locker and didn't make eye contact with her. Listen, I'm sorry I said those mean things to you the other day. Abby finally looked at her. Hey, they weren't wrong. I do still like cartoons and stickers and horses. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. Stickers and horses and cartoons are nice. And you're nice. And I'm sorry. Friends? She held her hand out, and Abby laughed and hugged her instead. When Abby pulled away from the hug, she looked Sarah up and down. Hey, have you gotten taller or something? There was no way she could explain it. No, I'm just working on having a better posture. Well, you're definitely succeeding. Eleanor had put Sarah to sleep with her usual sweet song the night before. This morning, still lying in bed, she looked at her body to see if she could tell which parts had gotten an upgrade. To her surprise, the parts of her that had been soft and flabby were now tight and toned, and parts that have been flat and childish were now rounded and feminine. Sarah goes down to her mom and asks her if they could go shopping this weekend to buy new bras. When her mom looked at her, she was surprised and agreed. At school, she noticed boys were staring at her. As she was walking, she bumps into Mason Blair again. Mason smiled and told Sarah that they should have to stop bumping into each other like this. Sarah tells him that she at least didn't have a salad with her this time. Mason smiled and says the salad incident was really funny. Mason introduces himself to Sarah, even though Sarah already knew his name, and then he tells her that he'll see her around. In class, Sarah tells Abby that she spoke with Mason. Abby isn't surprised and tells Sarah there is something different about her lately. In the evening, Eleanor woke up and Sarah hugged her and thanked her for these changes. Eleanor is glad to give Sarah her wish, but Sarah wasn't quite done yet. Even though she is happy with the changes, she still hated her face and her potato-y nose. She asks Eleanor to change her face. Eleanor reached up and touched Sarah's cheek.
Sarah, do you really want me to change all this? Do you want a new face?
I do, Sarah said. I want a tiny nose and full lips and high cheekbones. I want long, dark eyelashes and nice eyebrows. I don't want to look like Mrs. Mix and Match anymore. Eleanor laughed her tinkly laugh.
I can do this for you, Sarah, but you have to understand, it's a big change. You can look in the mirror and see longer legs or a curvier figure, and they just look like you've grown. Faster than expected, maybe. But still, growth is normal for a child. It is something you know will happen. All your life, though, you looked in the mirror, seen your face, and said, "That's me." It is true that your face changes some as you grow, but it is still recognizable as you. To see a totally different face as your reflection can be quite a shock.
It's a shock I want, Sarah said. I hate my face the way it is.
Very well, Sarah,
Eleanor said, looking into her eyes.
as long as you're sure.
After eating dinner and finishing homework, Sarah goes back to her room and tells Eleanor she's ready. Eleanor sings Sarah to sleep.
Go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep, my sweet Sarah. When you wake, all your dreams will come true.
Just like before, Sarah felt the changes before she saw them. As soon as she woke, she reached up and touched her nose. She felt not a potato-like bulb, but a pert little point. She ran her hands over the sides of her face and felt clearly defined cheekbones. She touched her lips and found them plumper than before. She hopped out of bed to take a look. It was amazing. The person looking back at Sarah was a totally different person than before. Eleanor was right. It was quite shocking, but it was a good kind of shock. Everything she had hated about her appearance was gone and had been replaced by absolute perfection. Her eyes were wide and a deeper blue and fringed with long, sooty lashes. Her eyebrows were delicate arcs, her nose was tiny and perfectly straight, and her lips were a pink cupid's bow. Her hair, while still brown, was fuller and shinier and fell into pretty, soft waves. She looked herself up and down. She smiled at herself with her straight, white teeth. Beautiful. She was the total package. School was a totally new experience. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, guys and girls alike. When she looked at the Beautifuls, who also happened to be wearing red today, they looked back at her, not with disdain, but with interest. Suddenly, one of the Beautifuls calls out for Sarah. She tells Sarah to sit with them. She excitedly agrees and sits with them. The Beautifuls ask Sarah loads of questions about her, which Sarah answers with confidence. One of the questions the Beautiful asked her was if she had a boyfriend. Sarah tells them she doesn't, but she likes a guy named Mason Blair. After their questioning, the Beautifuls tell Sarah that she can hang out with them any time. Sarah left the cafeteria smiling to herself. Abby caught up to her. She tells Sarah that she looked like she was in an intense job interview. Sarah explains that it kinda was. Abby asks her if that's the kind of friends she wants, one that requires passing some sort of test. Sarah tells Abby that the Beautifuls were cool and they talk about makeup and fashion and all sorts. Abby tells her that these girls are shallow, so shallow they can make a rain puddle look like an ocean. Sarah shook her head. She loved Abby, she really did, but why did she have to be so judgmental? Sarah tells her that the Beautifuls rule this school, and beautiful people get what they want. She looked at Abby's gorgeous brown complexion, at her striking hazel eyes. She tells Abby that she can be the most beautiful girl in school if she lost the glasses and braids and bought some clothes that weren't so baggy. Abby responds with a little edge in her voice. She can't see without her glasses, and she likes her braids, and her clothes make her cozy. She guesses she likes herself the way she is, and at least she's nice to other people, and doesn't test anyone to make them her friend. Abby looked at Sarah's face searchingly. You have changed, Sarah, and not for the better. Abby turned her back on Sarah and marched down the hall. Sarah knew Abby was a little mad at her, but she also knew an apology and a hug would fix things once she had time to cool down. After the bell, Sarah was walking toward the school bus. Sarah became suddenly aware of a presence behind her. It was Mason. He tells her that one of the Beautifuls mentioned they were talking about him in the cafeteria today. Sarah fought the urge to run. Mason asks Sarah to go out on a date with her. Sarah smiled. She could hardly believe her good luck today. She agrees. Once home, Sarah excitedly tells Eleanor everything that happened today. Eleanor asks if Sarah's wish has come true. Sarah tells her that it did. Eleanor tells her that her wish has also come true, too. She also reminds Sarah to always keep wearing the necklace. Sarah's mom drops Sarah off for her date with Mason Blair. While they were watching a movie, Mason reached over and took her hand in his. It was the most perfect moment of a perfect night. When Sarah was getting ready for bed, Eleanor asks her how the date went. Sarah felt a smile spreading on her face just from thinking about it. She tells her it was great and really liked Mason even more. He also invited her to see a basketball game next week. Eleanor was glad Sarah was happy, and she tells her good night and deactivates. In the morning, Sarah found her mom in the laundry room. "Can you drive me to the mall to meet my friends this afternoon?" she asked. Mom looked up from unloading the dryer and smiled. "You're quite the social butterfly this weekend. What time are you supposed to meet them?" She folded the towel and set it in the laundry basket. "They just said in the afternoon," Sarah said. "That's pretty vague, isn't it?" Mom said, folding another towel. "I don't know. The way they said it, I kind of felt like I should just know when they meant." She was so shocked to be accepted, even on a trial period, by the Beautifuls that she was afraid to ask questions. "Your new friends expect you to be psychic?" Mom said. "You don't like my new friends, do you?" Sarah said. "I don't know your new friends, Sarah. I just know they were girls who wouldn't give you the time of day before, and now they're suddenly inviting you to hang out with them? It's kind of strange. I mean, what's changed?" "I've changed," Sarah thought. "Just look at me." But she said, "Maybe they just finally decided I'm a likable person." "Yeah, but what took them so long?" Mom said. "You know what friends of yours I like? Abby. She's smart and she's kind. And she's straightforward. You always know where you stand with a person like Abby." Sarah didn't want to tell her mom that she and Abby weren't speaking to each other currently, so instead she said, 2 o'clock. How about you take me to the mall at 2 o'clock? "Okay." Mom tossed a towel at her. "Now help me fold." At the mall, she finds the Beautifuls trying on lipstick. Sarah doesn't have enough money to buy anything, so she watches the Beautifuls buy a ton of makeup with their parents' credit cards. They then try out dresses for prom. But after an hour and a half, a sales lady comes up to the girls and asks them if they are going to buy anything or just playing dress up. They ditched the dresses and fled the formal wear department, giggling, not caring about the disgruntled woman. At the food court, the Beautifuls laugh while they mocked the sales lady. Sarah laughed along with them, even though she thought they might have been a little hard on the sales lady, who was just trying to do her job. Jillian and Emma had left the dresses they tried on in crumpled piles on the dressing room floor. Now the sales lady probably had to clean up after them. But who was she to criticize the Beautifuls? It was an honor that they invited her out with them. It was glamorous and exciting, like she was a guest on a reality TV show. No matter what they said or did, she was happy just to be included. Yesterday, her date with Mason had been perfect, and now she got to be out with the Beautifuls. How could she ever express her gratitude to Eleanor? Nothing she could say would ever be enough. That night, Eleanor activates again. Sarah hugs her again and thanks her. Eleanor hugged her back, and, as always, the sensation was odd. There was no softness in her hug. Sarah settled down happily to sleep, but her rest was disturbed by a strange dream. She was on a date with Mason, sitting in the movie theater. But when he reached over to hold her hand, it was not his hand she grasped, but Eleanor's tiny, white, metallic, and cold. The same hand she had grabbed to pull the robot girl out of the car trunk. She opened her eyes to find Eleanor standing over her bed, her head lowered, staring at her with her blank green eyes. Sarah asks Eleanor what she's doing at the side of her bed. She tells Sarah that she always stays at the side of her bed every night to keep her safe. Eleanor reaches out to brush back Sarah's hair. Maybe it was because of the dream, but for some reason, Sarah didn't feel like letting Eleanor touch her. Eleanor asks Sarah if she should stay near the door to make Sarah more comfortable. Sarah agrees, and Eleanor strolled over to the door and stood guard there. Sarah didn't sleep well. She didn't know what, but something was wrong. In the cafeteria, Sarah stood in line with the other Beautifuls as they waited to empty their trays. She hears the Beautifuls whisper to each other. They were criticizing someone for wearing something that made them look like a preschooler. With horror, Sarah realized the girl they were criticizing was Abby, who was emptying her tray ahead of them. True, Abby was wearing pink overalls, so the preschooler comment wasn't too far off the mark, but it seemed mean to reduce someone's whole value as a person to the clothes she wore. "That's Abby," Sarah heard herself saying. "She's really nice. She's been my friend since kindergarten." She almost found herself saying best friend, but she stopped herself in time. "Yeah?" Lydia said, laughing. "But you've bought new clothes since kindergarten, and she hasn't." The Beautifuls all laughed too. Sarah tried for a smile, but she couldn't quite manage it. When it was Sarah's turn to dump her tray, she stepped on something slippery near the trash can. The fall felt like it took forever, but she was sure it was only a matter of seconds. Then she was flat on her back, right in front of the whole school. The Beautifuls make fun of Sarah and call her a klutz, and all of them start to laugh. In Sarah's dazed state, she couldn't really tell which girl was saying what. Their voices sounded distant and distorted, almost as if Sarah was trying to hear them underwater. Sarah tried to pull herself up, but something strange was happening to her body. She heard weird clashing and clanging sounds, and couldn't figure out where they were coming from. It didn't make sense, but they felt like they were coming from inside of her. She was shaking and jerking, and she couldn't make her body move the way it usually did. Her body was no longer under her control. She was scared. Had she hurt herself badly? Should someone call her mom? Call an ambulance? And why were her new friends not helping her? They were still laughing, still joking about how stupid she looked and how funny her fall was. Then the laughter was replaced by screams. A terrible thought occurred to Sarah. She put her hand to her throat. The necklace Eleanor gave her, the necklace that was never, ever to be taken off, was gone. She must have knocked it off during the fall. She turned her head and saw it on the floor, just a little more than arm's length away. She had to get it back. A hand reached down to help her. Sarah looked up to see that the hand belonged to Abby. She took it and allowed herself to be pulled up into an awkward standing position. When Sarah looked down at her body, she saw the reason for the girl's screams. Her body was changing. From the waist down, she was no longer a flesh and blood girl, but a jumbled collection of gears and bicycle spokes and hubcaps, rusted metal odds and ends, cast off, useless parts that belonged in a wrecking yard. She locked eyes with Abby, and saw her friend's horror at what she was, at what she had become. "I've got to go," Sarah said. Her voice sounded different, metallic and harsh. Abby held out the necklace. "You dropped this," she said. Tears sparkled in her eyes. "Thank you, Abby. You're a good friend," Sarah said. She didn't say anything to the Beautifuls, who had all backed away from her and were whispering among themselves. Sarah grabbed the pendant and ran as fast as her new, shambling makeshift metal legs would carry her out of the cafeteria and out of the school. Home. She had to get home. Eleanor would know what to do, would know how to help her. Her body still changing and getting stiffer. She tried to fasten the necklace around her neck again, but her fingers had grown too stiff to manage the clasp. People were looking at her with fear in their faces. Sarah felt like crying, but apparently the kind of thing she was becoming was incapable of producing tears. Maybe tears would make her rust even worse. Her joints were getting stiffer and stiffer, and it was growing harder and harder to run, but she had to get home. Eleanor was the only one who could help her. Finally, after what seemed like hours, she reached her house. She goes inside and can't find Eleanor in her room. Sarah combed through the house, searching her mom's room, the bathroom, the kitchen, all the time calling Eleanor's name with her new, horrible voice. She goes into the garage. Maybe the robot girl was hiding from her on purpose. Maybe it was some kind of joke or game. She looked at the ceiling-high storage cabinet against the back wall of the garage. It seemed like a good hiding place. With some difficulty, she grabbed the handle of the cabinet door and pulled. It was an avalanche. Clear plastic bags holding different objects with different weights and sizes toppled out of the cabinet and fell to the floor with a dull, sickening thud. Sarah looked at the floor. At first her brain couldn't even process what she saw. One bag contained a human leg, another a human arm. They were not the body parts of an adult, and they didn't appear to be the result of an accident. Blood pooled in the bottoms of the bags, but the limbs had been severed neatly, as if in a surgical amputation. Another bag, stuffed with bloody, snake-like entrails and what appeared to be a liver, slid from the cabinet's shelf and landed on the floor with a wet splat. Why were there body parts in her garage? Sarah didn't fully understand until she saw the small bag that held a familiar-looking, potato-shaped nose. She screamed, but the sound that came out of her was like the squealing of a car's brakes. Behind her came a metallic, tinkling laugh. Sarah's lower body was almost immobile, but she dragged herself around to face Eleanor.
I made your wish come true, Sarah,
the pretty robot said with another metallic giggle.
And in return,
Sarah noticed something she'd never seen on Eleanor before. A heart-shaped pendant just below Eleanor's throat that was a double of Sarah's heart-shaped pendant. Eleanor laughed again. She jerked and shook, but she also visibly softened, her silver finish turning the pinkish shade of Caucasian skin. In a matter of moments, she was a dead ringer for Sarah. The old Sarah. The real Sarah. The Sarah who, looking back on it, hadn't been so bad looking after all. The Sarah who had spent way too much time worrying about her appearance. Abby had been right. She had been right about a lot of things. Eleanor pulled on an old pair of Sarah's jeans, one of her sweaters, and her tennis shoes. Well, you certainly made my wishes come true, Eleanor said, smiling with Sarah's old smile. She pushed the button that opened the garage door. Sunlight flooded the room, and Sarah, gave a little wave, then skipped out into the sunshine and down the sidewalk. Sarah's ears filled with a deafening clinking and clanking. She couldn't control her movements. Different rusted metal parts disconnected from her and fell clattering to the floor. She was falling apart, collapsing into an ugly trash heap, a hideous, useless collection of garbage to be thrown away and forgotten. In an old mirror propped up against the garage wall, she saw herself. She was no longer a pretty girl, or a girl at all. She didn't resemble a human of any kind. She was nothing but a rusty, dirty pile of junk. She felt sad, then she felt scared, and then she felt nothing at all.